10 translated as, he who does so at the time of his departure with a steady mind, devotion, power of yoga, and setting well his life force in the center of the eyebrows, he attains to this supreme divine person. So the first word here is he. And we wonder, what does he mean? He means the person described in the 9th verse, i.e. the person is referring back to the person who constantly performs anusmaran of the Supreme Soul, and one who constantly remembers the Supreme Soul. This verse describes what happens to such a person. Shri Krishna begins to talk about a very important thing in this verse. So Guruji earlier wrote in this chapter that the 8th chapter of the Gita is a chapter that shows us how to welcome, and not only welcome, but decorate the process of death. It's the 8th chapter for this. Shri Krishna doesn't say this here, does not say that the person is a karma yogi, i.e. a yogi of the path of action, or a bhakti yogi, which is a yogi of the path of devotion, or a gnan yogi, which is a person of the path of knowledge. Shri Krishna doesn't say anything like this. He just says a yogi, and therefore what we can interpret is that the yogi can walk on any of these paths, and as long as such a yogi has done anusmaran of the Supreme Soul, by recalling and thinking about the Supreme Soul at all times, what is described in this verse will happen to such a yogi. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether you choose bhakti, karma yogi, or gnan yogi. At the time of death, such a person makes his life breath steady and fixed in the center of the eyebrows. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya Ji got a word out of this, and that word is smaran, which is to remember. One should do this with a mind full of wonder. Think about it. Even during one's last moments, the mind can be made steady. This is because whenever a last moment comes, then the mind is hardly steady. For example, before an exam, before you get married, moments just before, people always get a little anxious. Another example is if we have to go out of town for a few days, before leaving our house, our mind isn't steady at all. We're always wondering, what did we leave behind? Did we do the alarm? People are always arguing whether we should take this or take that. Has the window been closed properly? Who's left the lights on in the bathroom? Whether the switch has been turned off? So just a trip for 2 days out of town, our mind isn't steady. So if we completed the journey of life, then at that time, such a person should try to be steady, and such a person, at the end in this verse, is described as having a steady mind. And a person who does have a steady mind will attain the supreme and divine person, which is the imperishable Brahman. Such a person will attain the Supreme Soul. A person who has done anusmaran, which is constant recalling and remembering of the Supreme Soul throughout their life, at the end of their lives, they're set well, because their life force is at the center of their eyebrows, and with a steady mind will become joined with the Supreme Soul. And this is well planned. First of all, one has to think about the Supreme Soul over and over again. The main meaning of the word prayankal is death. And that's the first word in this 10th verse. But the real meaning is during every moment. When I first read this, I thought it would be sad, but actually it's not, because death of a human being is defined as something that's happening every moment. Scientists have actually proved this, because every 7 years our body changes and changes and develops. So it changes completely. Each and every cell of our body changes every single 7 years. Our body 7 years ago and our body now are completely different. It's like the sky and the earth. Not one cell in our body is the same as that which it was 7 years ago. We could just look at our photo maybe 15 or 20 years ago, and the photo of us then and the photo of us now is completely different. Sometimes you wonder, is that really me? And when you look at your passport photos, for example, and this is actually what we feel like. You'll see how much you've changed in each 7 years, and every cell of your body changes, and therefore every moment something or another in your body is dying. Let us say, for example, that your body is 50 or 60 kilos. When you look around, hopefully here is no one's as less than 50 kilos, but let's just say for argument's sake, if your body is 50 kilos, and in 7 years your entire body changes, if you do mathematical calculations, then you'll realize that every day 20 to 40 grams in your body will die, and in 7 years 50 kilograms of your body will die, and every day 20 to 40 grams of your body is dying. It's all changing. What's the meaning of this? Scientists say that at the beginning of life, however many cells die, more cells than that are created. Our weight increases and our height increases. All of this keeps increasing. But during the last stages of our lives, more cells die than the number of cells that are created. And this is why we see death and mortality. The activity of dying is constantly happening. The body does keep dying. The analogy that's used here is that when you buy a train ticket for a train, whether you fall asleep on the train, or whether you read a newspaper, or you talk to your fellow commuters, or if you just sit there and look out the window and watch the journey go by, you're still going to reach your destination. The journey is still continuing. Often not on the tube, but it's still continuing. In the same way, once you've got a ticket for birth, and you sit in the train of life, then no matter what you do in life, whether you do business, you do work, you meet your relatives, or you sit around talking or do anything else, that train still runs towards the destination of death. The journey keeps going on. Therefore, at that time, it's very important, this verse, that states that our mind should be steady. So you may wonder, how is it that your mind could become steady at the time of death? Being fickle is the characteristic of our mind. Therefore, how is it that we could make our mind steady, especially at a time of death? We should understand another characteristic of the mind, and that is that whatever mind is attracted to, and wherever the mind gets a pull, the mind becomes steady there, and the mind becomes fixed. So we've looked at examples in the past. If you want a Ferrari, you want a watch, or you want a new pair of shoes, your mind becomes fixated on that one object. So this way, if we try to fixate our mind on the Supreme Soul, then our minds will be steady on that particular thing. At the time of death, the person described in this verse, therefore, must find the Supreme Soul attractive in his mind, and we must find a pull towards this. This is a person who, even during the last moments, hasn't forgotten their attraction to the Supreme Soul, and if indeed they do this, then their mind will become steady there. Sri Krishna also says in this verse that such a person must be devoted to the Supreme Soul. There are 3 stages. The first is life, in which we are living during every moment. In life, there are karmas, which are all the efforts that we are making. Sri Krishna describes karmas earlier in this chapter. While performing these karmas through some means or the other in this person's life, one gets the feeling that one wishes to bow down to something. Bowing down is what devotion is. 3 things are needed for this. Bhakti, which is devotion, namrata, which is humility, and bhav, which is feeling. There is love in bhakti, which is devotion, but it is different because bhakti doesn't mean love for one person, but it means love for everyone. Bhakti, which is devotion, doesn't mean accepting one person, but it means accepting every single person. Therefore, when one has love for one person or accept one person, then there is selfishness and worldly relations. But when you have love for all and you accept all as they are, this becomes bhakti, and this is true bhakti. True bhakti means something that is beyond reason or something that is beyond the capacity of your thoughts. Bhakti means living within the capacity of feelings. If you look at the body by means of the anatomy, then the person operating from we are all operating from our mind, but actually our heart is in the middle. If you look at it spiritually, then the feelings of the heart are well beyond reason. Bhakti means living and feeling and living with the heart. Sri Krishna then goes on in this verse to describe Yogbal. Yogbal is translated as the power of yoga. By power of yoga, people take it to mean asanas, i.e. the physical stuff that you do, the physical postures of yoga, or pranayama, which is the breathing exercises. And these are indeed very necessary to keep our bodies fit. But these are not defined as yogbal, which is the power of yoga. So therefore you may wonder, what exactly is yogbal? Srimad Acharyaji defines yogbal as the mind's steadiness born of accumulated impressions produced by concentration. I'll just repeat that. The mind's steadiness born of accumulated impressions produced by concentration. So why does the mind become steady? It is because during the state of samadhi, and samadhi, as we saw earlier, is a high level of consciousness during meditation, these impressions of the Supreme Soul become so fixed that no other thoughts come to one's mind. They are accumulated through constant remembering and thinking about the Supreme Soul, and because of this the mind becomes steady. Madhusudan Saraswati ji says in his Bhakti Rasayan Granth, Drute Chitta Pravishyaya Govinda Karata Stita. This is translated as, when the thoughts become delicate and steady, then the coin of Govinda becomes stamped into them. So Govinda Sri Krishna, or whatever form of God that you believe in. I do not know if they do anymore, but in the past, when you had to register a letter and you go to the post office, and the staff in the post office in India would tie a letter with string on all 4 sides, and then where the knot falls, they do a shellac. A shellac is a stick which they use, they burn it on the flame of a lamp, and then when the shellac burns, then its drops fall, and after the drops fall on the envelope, a little is gathered, and the postmaster lays it on the bundle like a coin. So in a way, this example shows once the bundle is sealed, nobody can then open it. Only the person who receives the post can actually open it. So when the coin of Govinda, the Supreme Soul, becomes fixed, then nobody else will be able to open it. Only the person to whom the post is addressed, i.e. the Supreme Soul, can open it, and the Supreme Soul says that this mind is for me. Nobody else can open it. The mind is steady, and this is defined as Yogbal. Therefore, we might wonder, what happens through Yogbal? If you think about the ease with which this person is basically going, for example, when you're moving from an old house to a new house, you're very happy because you know that your old house is too small to live in, and it'd be better off if you moved to a bigger house with bigger bedrooms, and say, for example, the people in your house, children have gotten older, and your possessions or your belongings have increased, and whilst in the old house, you're always looking for the new house. So if we use this analogy to define when someone's living and then when they want to move on to the next stage in their lives, this person goes on with, for example, estate agents and says to look at a new house, chooses the one that he likes, and he makes a deal. Some people even plan more than this by making sure that all the furniture has been moved to the new house. When the new house gets ready, they pick the time. One day they leave the house and enter into the new house. And in the same way as this natural action happens, and it's a well-planned activity, a true yogin who has the power of yoga is in this body at that time, has planned everything and plans well in advance in every way for what's going to happen after death, and thereafter leaves the body and goes. Only then can this ease and steadiness of the mind remain. This person knows and has known for a week that, say for example, next Sunday at 9 a.m. he has to move house and therefore gets everything ready in advance and leaves his house at 7 a.m. in order to get there. In this same way, a person who has much preparation in his life and attains yogbal, which is the power of yoga, gives one liberation. Human beings can be defined as imprisoned. If you look at society, for example, there are many people who feel that they are trapped and they are in bondages. You can't free them from these bondages. So why are people imprisoned? They're not imprisoned in steel cages or steel nets. They're not imprisoned. They're actually imprisoned in the prison of their own thoughts. People are imprisoned in their own prejudices. The sigh in the form of the soul is snatched away from them, and people are imprisoned within clutches of sects today. People have begun thinking so much about superstitions. An example is a bird who lives in a cage. At the beginning it feels nice for the bird because it feels by living in the cage it won't have to go and look for grains and it will get its grains fed to them every day. If, for example, it's a parrot, it will be happy to think that it gets its chilies every day. I realise that parrots are immune to heat and chilies, therefore they can eat chilies all the time. And at the beginning this feels nice for these birds or the parrot because there's security, bondage and being safe in the cage. If the cage is opened, then other birds might kill them, or the other animals may come in and kill it within the cage. But if it's in the cage, it's safe and it's not trapped. It may be trapped, but it's safe in there. There's an element of security. At the beginning, it feels as if it's secure, as if it has security, but in the end, it finds out that security is actually very expensive to its life. This is because it realizes that a bird belongs in the sky and the whole sky belongs to it. I think this is quite a beautiful analogy because it makes the bird realize it doesn't have to live with these limits and these bondages. And in the same way, if we look at yoga, which is the power of yoga, the first consequence is that the person becomes free from these bondages. This energy is such that one realizes that the Supreme Soul is not somewhere outside us. The Supreme Soul is actually inside us, and the Supreme Soul is part of us, and that we are part of the Supreme Soul. This type of proclamation is yogbal, i.e. the power of yoga. Yogbal means to remember one's strength and one's qualification. The Supreme Truth is always residing within us, and we spend our life focusing on such useless things. Isn't this quite an insult to ourselves? Forget ourselves. Isn't it an insult to God who is right within us? Such a great power is residing within us, but we waste our time thinking about useless things. There's one principle we must understand. If a person, a society, or a country has small problems, then it will develop very little, and the greater the problems are, the faster that they would develop. So, for example, if we consider what problems is it that society is facing, what difficulties and problems is society making efforts to solve these problems? A person in the West once asked Guruji that India has such beautiful culture and it's such a great country, and yet we wonder why India is in such a state. Guruji said, look at the problems that India has today. Its problems so little. We think they're great problems, and the world's problems, the words seem so huge, as unemployment, population growth, etc., etc. But the commonest man and the commonest people, what they're trying to do is deal with the smallest of all problems. Their problem is to fill their stomachs twice a day. Their problem is waiting in line at the rationing shop. They have the problem of using the gas cylinder at the gas station. They have the problem of reserving a ticket for a train. The common man that's described by the words of economists as sleeping giants are spending all of their time dealing with such small problems of life. And this is why the energy that's within us is going to waste. And often we say that we should save our energies not to worry about small things, but to worry about larger things. So in this light, if we want to get out of these problems, we should expand our horizons, look outside of ourselves. There's a life there, and that's where the brain therefore should go. Another way to look at this is if there are small problems, then there's small development. If there are big problems, then there's big development. She often says that if you wish to develop your child, the way in which you should do this is to keep giving the child problems. Say, for example, if the child wants to keep having lots of pencils and erasers for its pencil case, and it keeps asking the father should tell the child that it won't get it, and the child should handle having just one pencil. And say, for example, if the child asks for a sharpener, they shouldn't just immediately get it. The child shouldn't have to erase things all the time. The child should be very careful in the way it's writing so that it won't have to erase anything. These are problems. Guruji says we doesn't mean to deprive children of these things, but the child should learn how to face life. This is a basic example, and only then will it build up strength inside it. What problems does society face with today? It makes us very sad to see the problems of society. People have to stand outside rationing shops. They're hanging onto railway lines. It's an insult to humanity. This is an insult to God residing within human beings. It's an insult to the consciousness of Brahman. This is indeed an insult to the Supreme Soul, who is defined as Satchitananda, which is defined as existence, knowledge, and bliss. On the other side of the fence, people are purposely getting engaged in such nonsensical activities. We see on television things like Take Me Out and reality TV, and there's a quiz show where people will ask an actor in a film what they say to an actress and what they did in such a film, and then they wonder what they did in a certain quiz show. Are these really problems? No. These are nonsense activities that societies are engaged in. So, for example, we were to ask someone a question that Arjun was asked in the Gita. Did somebody ask to say what Arjun said in the Gita? No. If you put such problems in front of the youth, then the youth will become similar to Arjun. Give the problems that Arjun had to youth, and then they'll become similar to him. Give the problems that Parikshit had in the Srimad Bhagavad, and then you'll become like Parikshit. Give them the problems that Sri Ram had in the Yoga Vashishta Ramayan, and then they'll become like Sri Ram. Therefore, what are the problems? A lot depends on this. When the truth of Brahman within each person becomes manifest, then it is yoga, the power of yoga. Just try to look inside and see what's inside you. Is it emptiness? Is it frustration? Is it tiredness? Is it worry and concern? Is it depression? What can be seen? Why can these be seen? We're living such a limited life, and therefore why are we living? What should we live for? Often people say, until we die, we just have to live. People are just dragging on in their lives, but this is the wrong mentality. Often if you ask someone, how's life going? Oh, they say tagging along. But this is, where is the liberation and bliss of life? Where is the song of life? Where is that feeling of realization of the supreme truth? When we say sarvasya chaham ratisam nivishtam like parrots, why does it not feel that the supreme truth is within us? Does it feel as the supreme soul is residing within you? One must experience the setbacks and the problems of life. What will this life of ours be like after death? Is this life any different after death? Is this life any better after death? Is it that when certain people reach a certain age, they say, "Oh Lord, please free us from this and take us away"? The reason for this is that for them, death will be better than what they're living at the moment. They don't know what death is like. Does anyone know what death is like? No. But they feel that death must be better than what they're currently living, and that's quite sad. An example of this is when a poet went to a friend's shop, and he said the shopkeeper was, lots of shop analogies today, the shopkeeper was busy, and the shopkeeper had no time for his friend. And the poet said he'd written 2 poems, and he asked the shopkeeper to tell him which poem was better. The poet read the first poem, and the shopkeeper immediately said that the second poem is better without even listening to the second one. It's the same situation with life. People who don't like life and think that they don't need life, they don't know, they just presume that what's after life will be better. Therefore, the power of yoga is not becoming a slave to the material world, despite standing in the middle of the material world and taking bliss from the material world. In this verse, remembering God doesn't mean to keep chanting Ram, and if a cat comes along then to run away, but the power of yoga in one's life is creating a beautiful scent in your own life, making one life full of great things, and when the flame of life shines brightly, you'll have the glow of the Supreme Soul. When such a person goes, and at that time with a steady mind and devotion, he creates what is defined as yogbal. One can set his life force at the center of the eyebrows, and this is a beautiful subject, because many people probably have heard of the 7 chakras that we have, which are the 7 centers of energy in our body. There are 7 chakras, so I'll list these. The first one is the Muladhara chakra, which is the base chakra. The second is the Swadesh chakra, which is the sacral chakra. The third is the Manipur chakra, which is the navel chakra. The fourth is the Nahat chakra, which is the heart chakra. The fifth is the Vishuddha chakra, which is the throat chakra. The sixth is the Agna chakra, which is the brow chakra. The seventh is the Sahasrara chakra, and this is crown chakra, or the plane of Brahman. Out of these, the Agna chakra, which is this one I mentioned, is at the center of the eyebrows. Our yoga scriptures describe this as the Dvidal chakra. The person described in this verse set his life force in that exact spot, in the middle of the eyebrows. If one was to say it in a different way, there is the Sushumna Nadi, a channel through which energies of the subtle body flow, in the Dvidal or the Agna chakra, which is the brow chakra, and such a person sets his life force in this. Such a person leaves his body with the yogbal. Kalidas says, while describing the Raghuvansh, which is the lineage of Ram, Raghunaman vayam vakshya sheshave abhyat vidyayam yovane vishanshayam valdakya nivrutinam yoganenanta tanutyajan. And this is translated as, what were the kings of the Raghu lineage like? During their childhoods, they would study at their guru's hermitage. Then they would enjoy the worldly pleasures of life. Then they would give everything back to society, and in the end they would leave their bodies. It doesn't say at the end that they would die. It says rather they would leave their bodies. Therefore, they're not going as slaves to the material world and to their karmas, but they're going as owners of the material world and karmas. Such a person described in this verse sets his life force at the center of his eyebrows and attains to the supreme divine person, which is the supreme soul. Ramanujacharyaji says that such a person attains this state and it comes to have power and glory similar to his. Such a person himself becomes the supreme divine person. In the 11th and 12th verses, the Lord will describe what such a person's last moments are like.